Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hello, hello. It's good to see everybody's smiling face this morning and chatty mouths. I mean, that's okay. We want to greet one another. And so why don't you just do that while you're seated. Just turn and smile at someone and say, you know, you're really lucky to see me. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Kent. We are grateful for everyone who's involved in the service. Our greeters, our ushers, our tech team, Reverend Renee Rahutsky, our worship leader this morning, Emily Hall, our interim music director, Vanessa, thanks, who always does a wonderful job, and some special guests who are going to be sharing this morning as well. So we're glad to have everyone help. It does take a lot of people to be involved in making things go as smoothly. See, all you do is come and go. You don't see behind the scenes and what's going on. But thanks for coming. After our service this morning, we just ask that you would remain. We're going to be showing, excuse me, we'll be showing a video about the upcoming dinner and live auction. So I want to share that with you. That'll be after Reverend Renee's last words. So let's just take a moment. Just take a deep breath with me. Just centering ourselves and being grounded, being present, being with one another, being where we are. We really have nowhere else to go and nothing else to do. We're here, present together, as we gather together for worship. So come, let us worship together.
So before we get started, I just want to say this morning we are going to go a little deeper as part of this worship service, a little deeper into our theology, a little deeper into some of the heart work and soul work that's part of Unitarian Universalism. And so one thing we did is we chose some music which has a little more emotion in it, and if you are feeling some, if you feel feels during the music, as I was feeling during some of the practice, just go with it. If you take care of yourself as you need to. If you need a Kleenex, there's Kleenex in the pews. Take deep breaths, whatever you need to take care of yourself. So this comic came across my social media feed the other day, and I thought it captured an eternal truth about our humanity. A cardinal and a bluebird are on a branch of a tree, and the cardinal says, "Can I help you?" The bluebird says, "Huh?" The cardinal says, "You landed on my tree." The bluebird says, "Your tree?" The cardinal says, "Yeah, I inherited it from my grandpa, who stole it from some squirrel." Bluebird, "That's stupid. You can't own a tree." Cardinal, "What if I sold it to you at a very reasonable price?" The bluebird thinks to itself, "Wow, my own tree." How often do we have a big T truth that we know in our hearts? You can't own a tree. And then mindlessly change our minds. We displace that truth with a construct, an idea that we come up with but doesn't have any evidence. In this case, I have the right to own nature. Religion is one way of meaning-making, of creating constructs to help us understand and to give purpose to our lives. At its best, religion gives us a moral compass as we make meaning, often based on a sacred text or a particular historical figure. Unitarian Universalism uses conscience in relationship to a community and responsible to a shared of set values. Sometimes we humans create an old construct and discover that we need to deconstruct it because we realize it isn't actually a big T truth. Often this happens while many other humans around us may keep believing. Here are a few examples of truths that I do not believe, but many others still do. Humans have dominion over nature. European culture is the pinnacle of civilization, and everything else is backward or primitive. It's the job of some humans to meet other humans' needs because of their lesserness, their gender, their color, education level, or economic class. This deconstruction is deep soul work. It calls us to step out of a sense of self-confidence and into a place of confusion, vulnerability, discomfort, and eventually transformation. But it is possible to do so because we, yous, do it together. We are not alone. Come, let us worship together. So our opening song is a song by an artist named Jason Isbell. And the first time I heard it, I went, wow. Because it speaks, even though it's written from a certain point of view of a white male kind of figuring out his place in the world, there's also some eternal truths about how we might look at the world differently and how we're in that place of confusion, of having a new truth, but not really knowing what to do with it yet.
I'm a white man living in a white man's world. Under our roof is a baby girl. I thought this world could be hers one day, but her mama knew better. I'm a white man living in a white man's town. Wanna take another shot and burn it down. Mama wants to change that Nashville sound, but they're never gonna let her. There's no such thing as someone else's war. Your creature comforts aren't the only thing worth fighting for. Still breathing, it's not too late. We're all carrying one big burden, sharing one fate. I'm a white man living on a white man's street. Got the bones of the red man under my feet, and the highway runs through their burial grounds, past the oceans of cotton. I'm a white man looking in a black man's eyes, wishing I'd never been one of the guys who pretended not to hear another white man's joke. Oh, the times ain't forgotten. There's no such thing as someone else's war. Your creature comforts aren't the only thing worth fighting for. You're still breathing, it's not too late. We're all carrying one big burden, sharing one fate. I'm a white man living in a white man's nation. I think the man upstairs must have took a vacation. I still have faith, but I don't know why. Maybe it's the fire in my little girl's eyes. Maybe it's the fire in my little girl's eyes.
In a moment, Wendy Wilson is going to come up and light our chalice, but you may notice it's a different chalice than we normally have this morning. We actually have several chalices in this church. We have a glass chalice we've been using the past few years. We have a little gold chalice, which has the double rings. Those double rings are a symbol of Unitarians and Universalists coming together. So this morning, we're adding a third chalice to our collection.
Grace meets us where we are. There's nothing you need to bring with you to be welcome here. No right beliefs or proof of citizenship, no eternal optimism or clarity of conviction, no boundless courage or endless expertise. You do not need to know what brought you here or how you will solve that problem you are turning over and over and over in your mind. Your bills do not need to be paid, and your checkbook can be a mess. Your children may have been up half the night. Your hearing aids may not be working, and your knees may be creaking. You do not need to be already perfect or even halfway to belong in this circle where grace meets us where we are, but does not leave us as it found us. Where love resides in each of us, yet is somehow more than all, where life still pulses and rages and heals and transforms, creating us and this day anew once again. So come again and let us worship together.
This is the time in our service where we take a few moments to take a breath from the workabout world that many of us are a part of, from the hustle and the bustle, so that we can spend a little time connecting to our hearts, connecting to the center of our being, connecting to the interconnectedness of all that is the world. Let us share a few moments of silence together. Each week, we set aside time to reflect upon the personal. We may have sorrows, struggles, and losses that are breaking our hearts. We may have joys and celebrations that make our hearts sing. We invite you to come forward as you are able to choose an item to release into the bowl of water, whether it be a stone, a jewel, a shell, or a leaf or blossom. Yellow cards are also welcome that you can give to me. If you're on Zoom, you can also share joys and sorrows that you have in the chat. I will begin by dropping in a stone for those of you who wish to remain seated.
What are you longing for? What are you grieving for? What are you thankful for? We're here to...
Let us hold in our hearts the family of Mary Mask, longtime member of this congregation whose celebration of life was held this past Friday. Kat Holtz wants us to remember her dear friend Rich, who is back in the ICU and on a ventilator. Let us pray for peace and healing and freedom from pain. Mo Burns shares that Dr. Tanisha Lane, and for us to remember Dr. Tanisha Lane and her family, her mother died recently. Also sorrow for our church administrator, Mary Beth Hannon, and for me, who both lost our mothers last week. Dina shares that her dad is losing his memory, and for us to give her strength and love as she struggles with the impact. Ann Verweeby shares that she's thinking of her college friend Lori, who lost her husband this week. Heather Pritchard shares that April 5th would have been her sister Jennifer Pritchard's 58th birthday. Happy birthday, sweet girl, sweet sister, sweet spirit. I carry you close to my heart if you help light my path. And you help light my path. Thank you. Heather, may her memory always be a blessing to you. Heidi Schaefer-Bish shares that she and Randy are grateful to have their health back after a long bout with bad colds in their household. And Kay Ekman shares that she's excited about tomorrow's event. Is there something happening tomorrow? And sending out prayers for a clear sky. May the skies be clear, and may this wondrous event be something that will move us into a sense of wonder and joy.
Let me sing together, we're here with you. We're here with you. We honor you. And we love you. We're here with you. We honor you. And we love you.
So there are two groups of people on either side of a Grand Canyon screaming crude and rude epithets toward one another, creating an empty echo, a cacophony of sound that is deafening and drowning out the quiet whispers of respect, understanding, compassion, cooperation, dignity, and most of all, love. I will let your imagination decide what two groups of people they are. We live in a fractured and wounded political environment from which more and more people are disengaging. So what can we do to help heal that hurtful open wound? A young Republican woman shared with me why she was anti-abortion. I listened with focused, careful attentiveness to be able to repeat back to her what I thought I heard her say. I never condemned, nor judged her, nor immediately jumped in to correct her with my obvious enlightened opinions. I asked questions with genuine concern for why she believed this way. She would clarify her statements for me, and at times she even questioned her own opinions with some ambivalence. I never once said she was wrong, nor did I dismiss her feelings or her thoughts or her beliefs. It became a beautiful dialogue, actually, as we both shared our values with very deep listening, with respect and fair questions, while building understanding. What was the result of that conversation? A friendship. A friendship between two human beings was established. What was at the center? Love. Not my opinion, not her opinion, love. We must do what we can to build bridges, and demonizing those with different opinions are only going to reinforce that great divide as we continue to shout and yell at each other. Abraham Lincoln said, "We're not enemies but friends in the midst of the heat of a possible civil war. We must not be enemies, he said. Though passions may have strained it, it must not break our bonds of affection. The mystic chords of memory will swell again when again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. I suggest that we allow our better angels to arise.
My father was born in a little Eastern European country called Latvia. Like Ukraine, it shares a border with both Russia and Belarus. And my dad grew up speaking both Russian and Latvian. As a little boy, he experienced a Russian invasion by Stalin in 1941, then a German invasion, an occupation by Hitler and the Nazis in 1942. Then, in 1944, there was a second Russian invasion that resulted in over 40 years of occupation behind the Iron Curtain. Luckily, my 8-year-old dad, his 2-year-old sister, my grandparents and great aunt fled to Germany, where they were given food, shelter, and work. The rest of my Latvian relatives lived under the terror of a totalitarian regime. That is, if they weren't killed or sent to Siberia. When I was growing up, my grandparents and dad never shared stories of what happened with the Russians. Just a few oblique comments about how hard it was. I did know that my grandfather lived in constant fear that a KGB agent would track him down and kill him, even in a quiet neighborhood up in Michigan. Later, when I was an adult, I learned that he witnessed one brother being shot by Russian soldiers, while another brother and cousin were sent off to Siberia. A few years ago, I traveled to Latvia to learn about my family roots and to experience Latvian culture. The one thing that struck me was that nobody smiled in public. Nobody smiled. Americans have been exposed to hundreds of stories about Hitler and the Nazis, but I really had to dig to find out about the experiences of Eastern Europe under Stalin. It is horrifying. It is so horrifying that I had nightmares around the time of the invasion of Ukraine. I knew the history of the Stalin-created famines in Ukraine back in the 1930s. The Soviets confiscated every scrap of food from the family-owned farms and refused to give them any rations. They say that the countryside became bare of any vegetation and eerily silent because anything that moved was eaten. What I also learned about my deep dive into life behind the Iron Curtain is how living under a totalitarian regime was dehumanizing. I recently watched a 2021 documentary called Homo Sovieticus, that illustrated the impact 30 years after the USSR collapsed. It wasn't just being under constant control and surveillance. It was also being forced to deny and denounce one's history and identity. Even a suspicion of one's loyalties could cause utilities to be mysteriously shut off, or a job lost with no apparent reason. People learned to trust no one, which led to isolation, loneliness, and disconnection, and no smiling. This is why the current political moment in the US is so frightening to me. I notice the markers of totalitarianism. Totalitarianism has a very specific meaning that can help us to understand not only the dangers, but how we can respond to it. We start with authoritarianism, which is a government where a person or a small group of people are in charge without having any accountability to the people being governed. This accountability piece is crucial, and we'll come back to it later. Totalitarianism is authoritarianism that doesn't just stop at the government. Totalitarianism adds in some kind of ideology. It then uses that ideology to control most aspects of human life, such as the education system, what books are available, the arts, the sciences, and the private life morality of its citizens. We have a whole class of political leaders and billionaires who have embraced totalitarianism, containing at least 3 ideologies that I'm noticing. The ideology of white supremacy, where black and brown humans have less value. The ideology of patriarchy, where women's value is based on what they give men, and anyone who doesn't fit gender roles is a problem. And the ideology of parasitic capitalism, which is based on extraction and exploitation rather than in creating things that have their own value. But what frightens me the most is an emerging ideology that is a Frankenstein's monster that combines the worst of all 3 of these ideologies: Christian nationalism. Let's be clear that there is nothing in the teachings of Jesus that resemble what is coming out of the mouths of these men and a few women. They have rewritten the Gospels to glorify guns and conflate themselves with God and Jesus. They are embracing the wolf of totalitarianism while masquerading it in the sheep's clothing of Christianity. One way to think of Christian nationalism is how it echoes the belief, the old belief, in the divine right of kings, but with some self-appointed strongman in charge instead of the heir of the previous king. Whenever you have a person or a group who claims God is on their side so that they can seize power, it's a theological red flag. Unchecked power gives license to the worst of human impulses: to enslave, oppress, deport, imprison, conscript, rape, kidnap, and steal from others. We are experiencing a time where the theological red flags are multiplying. But there are a lot of shades of gray before they turn to red. And it's the gray shades where people can still reconsider opinions. This is where we can make a difference in this current political moment. A lot of people think of themselves as good Christians, but that can mean a lot of different things, especially depending on what church they go to or what news shows they watch. As Unitarian Universalists, we do not tend to ground ourselves in the teachings of any particular faith tradition. Many of us come out of a Christian tradition, but left because we had issues with the theology or some hypocrisy or inconsistency. Only a handful of UUs have an understanding of the complexities of a Christian theology, so we really can't authentically debate what's heresy and what isn't. And there are still plenty of real Christians who believe in the blessings of the meek and to turn the other cheek. These Christians continue to preach and advocate for their more compassionate understanding of the gospel, challenging the bumper sticker and the t-shirt theology that twists the gospel into Jesus, guns, babies, liberty. Google it, you can find those t-shirts. As the saying goes, we don't have a horse in that race, but we do have a favorite. So this is the point where I shift gears and start talking about what all of this means to Unitarian Universalists. Christian nationalism is a real threat, and we need to have our own response. We UUs are having our own conversation about the center of our faith nationally that touch on some of the same core issues. There are some thoughtful theological disagreements, but I haven't seen any head-scratching t-shirts or bumper stickers. Let me start by saying that one of the beautiful things about Unitarian Universalism is that we do not have to tie ourselves up in knots whenever we come to a new conclusion about something. This is partly because we don't make ourselves accountable to an ancient text. Our history is full of questioning. Do we have to practice Holy Communion to be a church? Do people have to believe in God to be a member? Should women be ministers? Should earth-centered traditions like paganism or Wicca be listed alongside Christianity and Judaism? How do we understand the privileges of whiteness, and what does that mean to how we live our lives? For the past several decades, we have been using 7 principles, recently adding an 8th, and mentioning 6 theological sources as the grounding of our faith. These have never been meant to become a creed. In fact, we are required by the national bylaws to revisit these ever so often so they don't become a creed. But for some reason, they've only been tweaked in spite of this bylaws requirement. And the last time around, in 2009, we couldn't even agree on a tweak, that time around cultural sensitivity. So a couple of years ago, the review process started again, and this time people started with a fresh sheet of paper. When you hear people talking about Article 2, this is what they are talking about. So before I talk about the details, I need to make clear that I am not advocating for any specific outcome. I'm UUA staff and we're not allowed to. But I have been, I know this is being recorded, so I'm holding myself responsible to that. But I have been part of the larger conversations around our core values. And today I'm explaining my understanding of these values and how they might guide our congregations and wider association. How clarifying and articulating the message of UU core values and my own theological understanding might give us a strong and compelling voice in the public sphere, especially in this time of threat from Christian nationalism. So the first thing you'll notice about the new Article 2 proposal is that it has a graphic. And maybe on Zoom you could zoom into that graphic so folks can see it a little better. This is created by UU artist Tanya Webster to communicate 6 core shared values that are inseparable and equal to one another. They didn't want to put them in order, so we put them in a circle of petals on a flower. You might notice that these values have also been this year's monthly worship themes: generosity, justice, interdependence, equity, transformation, and pluralism. But today, what I want you to notice is that love is at the center. In the proposal preceding these shared values, the proposed Article 2 includes new pragmatic purposes, 6 bullet points that will guide the work of UUA staff like me. These purposes give a little more clarity to the mission of the UUA: to assist congregations, support and train leaders, spiritual development, to heal historic injustices, and to advance UU values in the world. But then, the purposes take a bold step by naming in print what many of our prophetic UU leaders have been saying. Quote, "Our purpose also includes transforming of the world through liberating love." Love was not mentioned at all in the previous principles and purposes. There's that word love again, but a love that liberates, a love that calls for freedom from. Not the related and very different word of liberty that we are seeing on t-shirts and bumper stickers, along with pictures of eagles and guns. Liberty is expressing freedom to. Let's unpack the difference. Freedom from oppression, not freedom to oppress. Freedom from economic exploitation, not freedom to make the maximum profit at the expense of other people. Freedom of expression, not freedom to silence the expression of others. Liberating liberty. The proposal also reiterates our covenant of support between congregations. But instead of naming specific sources, which were transient and never seemed to include the breadth of faith and ethical traditions that we draw from, it names the more permanent qualities of the sources that we draw from: freedom, reason, hope, and courage. Again, these are particular expressions of faith that build upon the foundation of love. Freedom that wishes freedom for all. Reason that is curious and open to changing one's mind rather than being held defensively or like a weapon. Courage that serves the common good rather than the individual ego. Then the proposal takes another bold and some feel controversial statement. Quote, "Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values." So far, so good. And then it continues, quote, "We are accountable to one another for doing the work of our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love." Remember when I said we'd come back to the topic of accountability when I was talking about authoritarianism, where people are in charge without having any accountability? We have seen what happens when leaders are able to act without transparency or accountability. We saw it with Stalin. We have seen it in the tragedy of how the Catholic Church handled sexual criminal misconduct among their priests. And we are seeing it today in our criminal justice system, including locally. I see accountability as holding the line between the two different understandings of freedom. One is all humans enjoying freedom from harm from the myriad of oppressions and isms, and the freedom to do whatever one wants, no matter how much those actions harm others. Accountability ensures that love is grounded in mutuality and respect, not on giving without receiving in return. Accountability encourages each person to take responsibility for their actions. Accountability discourages codependent behaviors like pity or overfunctioning. Accountability also calls us to keep our promises, to work through our mistakes, and to accept an olive branch of reconciliation when it is sincerely offered. When I am talking about religion in the public sphere, I always look for or ask about where the lines of accountability are. When someone's accountability begins and ends with the divine, I raise an eyebrow. I once had a boss tell me that since I was a person of faith, I didn't need a raise for the extra work I was doing because my reward would come in heaven. He was enjoying the freedom to help himself to my labor. Then I enjoyed the freedom of not working there anymore when I found another job. As a congregation, accountability is actually a key part of how we have historically approached our theology. Our Pilgrim and Puritan ancestors saw the corruption of the bishops and presbyteries of their day and how they weren't staying true to the teachings of the Bible as the Puritans and Pilgrims understood it. It's in our congregational policy that the individual conscience, in conversation with others in the covenanted community, is the way that we practice accountability. You actually can't just believe whatever you want. You need to test it with your fellow sojourners on the path of faith. One person can't just make decisions for the whole community, not even the minister. Instead, we empower a group of leaders to look at the big picture and talk things through. And for the big decisions, we expect that the whole community will have a voice. Our bylaws reflect this understanding. Nationally in our denomination, things work much the same way. We have small groups writing curricula, collecting worship materials, and editing hymnals. But for the big decisions, like updating our national covenant principles and purposes, we convene a national conversation and vote. We have been invited into a conversation where some UUs, especially younger UUs, recognize the old inherited big T truth of individualism as a harmful construct and see the need to deconstruct it. There are also groups of UUs who are balking at the idea of accountability in Article 2 because they believe that individualism is an inalienable right. I think of the new approach to Article 2 as an invitation to do the hard work of discerning the big T truth around the tension between individual rights and community responsibilities. As I said earlier, this deconstruction is deep soul work. It calls us to step out of a sense of self-confidence into a place of confusion, vulnerability, discomfort, but eventually transformation. But we can do so because we are doing it together. We are not alone. Amen, and blessed be. As the ushers come forward, I want to share that we have a new special offering for the month of April, which is for the Indigenous Environmental Network. This is an organization of Indigenous peoples chosen by our youth who are doing a youth service trip there that helps to promote Indigenous autonomy and serving environmental justice issues that they and all of us care about. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us. Above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no country. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world can live as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will live as one.
So just like we have many chalices, there are many different versions of extinguishing the chalice. And this is the one as written in our hymnal, written by Elizabeth Sell Jones. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts, till we together again.
This song is by a friend of mine, Pat DeSimio, and he's with a UU church where Reverend Rod is right now, and they're doing this song this Sunday too, so I was just so thrilled. Love the connections. You'll pick it up, you can just join in with us too. We could surely use some saintly savior who could fix things single-handedly, but we do have us, so don't wait up. Even King marched with how many feet down the long, long road? We're up and going, can't you feel the wheels are rolling? And there ain't no paradise you get to alone. It's only all together we go. And there is no justice just for some, so the work's not done while a bit remains. And when justice rolls down like the waters, there will be no river banks down the long, long road. We're up and going, can't you feel the wheels are rolling? And there ain't no paradise you get to alone. It's only all together we go. And we know though only love can save us, grace and mercy play their parts when the lines divided good from evil run through every human heart down the long, long road. We're up and going, can't you feel the wheels are rolling? And there ain't no paradise you get to alone. It's only all together we go. We remembered all the ones before us who have borne us all along this way, and we'll do our part in this great journey toward the world we'll make someday on the long, long road. We're up and going, can't you feel the wheels are rolling? And there ain't no paradise you get to alone. It's only all together we go. Together again, down the long, long road. We're up and going, can't you feel the wheels are rolling? And there ain't no paradise you get to alone. It's only all together we go. Yes, it's only all together we go. Yes, it's only all together we go.
We close with words from Ursula Le Guin. We live in capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings. Any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings. Resistance and change often begin in art, and very often in our art, the art of words. Go in peace and unrest. Amen. And stay for the commercial.
The live auction is an opportunity for us all to get together, have an awesome meal, and then auction off donated services, events, and a small group of curated items.
The three things that I really like about the auction, number one is international foods. You can have international foods. I ate Greek food, I had Indian food, I had Irish food, without even leaving the area.
Well, I'll tell you, right now I'm enjoying a service auction event that we purchased last year at the service auction. It's a fine Hungarian dinner prepared by Paula Thurman and Lonnie Hawks, and right now I'm eating the chicken paprikas, and it's wonderful. And I would recommend that everybody come to the service auction this year so that they can bid on something like this again.
For me, it was moonlight canoeing offered by Tanya and Eric, and they had a wonderful picnic supper out at Mogador Reservoir, and they provided the canoes and all the equipment, and we had a lovely evening out on the lake.
I think it is one of the best ways to get to know other members of our community and of the church. Both at the service auction itself, you get to see what people have as their talents and things that they're offering. And in the events, especially my favorite things are to go to the dinners where you get to meet so many people and get to know them, and it helps you get to know people in the church that way. It's a great social activity.
And I like being able to bid up the dinners to a reasonable level so that we make a lot of money on them, and then relax a bit and see who we're gonna have dinner with.
Well, what I like about the service auction is I really think it's fun to bid on items that, you know, are kind of surprising. You never really know what's going to show up. In fact, Randy bid on a drum last time, and now he's using it for the drum circle.
The second thing is, if you think about it, anybody can do anything for the service auction. You don't have to have a special talent. You don't have to be able to sing like an opera star. You don't have to be able to do anything really wonderful. Just be you and do what you do. And you can offer that at the service auction. So it includes everybody. I like that.
I think my favorite item ever was the funding item. So we offer something that the church needs. One time it was a roof for the church, another time it was the kitchen equipment, and there's been others. And then we see, you know, if we can get enough bids to buy those items.
Our event raffle is a little bit different. It's an opportunity for folks that might not have the income to attend bigger ticket meals or events. And so for a $10 raffle ticket, you get a chance to get 2 seats at one of the open events from the auction catalog. And so that's a great opportunity for you to be able to take part in something that you might not have otherwise been able to afford.